to your river. I will come to your river.
Video to start off with. Welcome everyone to your Girls Right Now community chat. We have the wonderful djassi daCosta Johnson with us today to talk about dance as her passport becoming a multidisciplinary artist. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about how today is going to run before passing it on. So today you're going to hear all about djassi's journey, a wonderful full journey in dance and on to many other disciplines. We'll spend a little bit of time watching some videos, watching her art. Then we'll dive into an artist statement where you'll get the chance to write a poetic artist statement with djassi. Then we'll finish up with a conclusion and some Girls Right Now announcements, and then you'll have a wonderful rest of your evening. So without further ado, I'm super excited to pass it over to djassi daCosta Johnson.
Thank you, Andrea, so much. I'm so excited to be here. I'm really honored that you all invited me to speak. And like I said, when we first spoke, that you saw the full artist that I am. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about myself. I'm born and raised in Harlem, and I started moving because of my parents. My parents were very big on having us climb trees, be in nature, and my father wanted to find something for us that was physical and gave us kind of a martial arts awareness with our bodies. So we started taking capoeira. I also started, I think I started taking capoeira at 6 years old. And we also started doing breakdancing. My older brother was a breakdancer, so I followed him around everywhere. I'm from Harlem, Washington Heights, and I was famous for being in a crew where I was the only girl and I could spin on my head at 8, and I was just excited by what my body could do. So I was, it wasn't until I was 12, though, that I had my first real formal class. I was always aware I wanted to dance, and my parents are educators. My mom's a Montessori teacher. My father's a professor of sociology. They met in the civil rights movement and had 4 kids in Harlem, and they put us through private school and let us know that being an intellectual and educating ourselves as Black people in America was the most important thing. And so when I was in junior high school, after Montessori school, I went to Manhattan East. And my English teacher, his name is Melvin Jones. Rest in peace, Mr. Jones, and thank you so much. He just retired from the Alvin Ailey American Dance Company Theater and decided to teach English in Spanish Harlem on 99th Street and First Avenue. And for PE, he taught dance. He taught Horton technique and Graham technique. And so I got my first real modern codified technique in public school for free. And then my mom would take me around every summer, and wherever I got in, whatever school would take me for free as a scholarship kid was where I trained. So my training was really varied, and it was all over the city, downtown, uptown. I went to Ballet Hispanico for several years. I went to a school called Clark Center. I went to Harlem School of the Arts. And when I was 13 at Harlem School of the Arts, in addition to dance, I took my first ballet class with Ron Alexander. And then I began to take pictures, photography. I started with a Nikon, and then my dad had a Leica. He lent it to me, and I just gained a passion for taking pictures as well. And so academically, again, instead of just thinking academically, my parents also supported my art. So I did audition for LaGuardia, the School of Performing Arts, and I got in for dance. And I think I went to the orientation, and my parents came to me and told me that I had academic scholarship for the boarding school my brother was in, which was in Massachusetts, Northfield, Mount Hermon. And they told me how much the school costs and how much I got. And they said, if you go. If you don't like it, you can come home, but go. And I went, and the kind of freedom of spirit that I felt being a New York City kid really made me stay there, but they didn't have dance classes. So I became a choreographer. And I really explored a lot of my artistry there. They had modern classes, but they didn't have ballet. They literally taught ballet out of a book. But I knew that I still wanted to dance. So when I applied for college, I was adamant on coming back to New York. And I had god sisters who went to Barnard. So I applied to Barnard, and I just knew that that was going to be one of the places I was always going to go to school. When I found out Zora Neale Hurston went there, I had read Go Tell My Horse very young, and I Love Myself when I'm well, I'll get the title right another time, but there's so many Zora Neale Hurston books that inspired me. And then I discovered Ntozake Shange went there, and Twyla Tharp, and I just knew, okay, this was where I needed to go. So I got in, and I was still on scholarship at Ailey. So I made my way all the way through different dance schools, and I auditioned for this program at Ailey several times before they accepted me, which meant that I just went to another school, and I kept trying and trying, and was able to finally get a scholarship. And so I kept that scholarship while I was at Barnard in school, and going and taking lessons at Ailey, and being in the scholarship program in the summer. And it was just a really intense time in college, but that's when you just have so much energy. So I just wanted to do everything. I also always wrote. I'm a journaler. I found journals from when I was like 8 years old. I've always been archiving and writing my experiences. So I started interning at magazines, and I interned at Vibe magazine while I was at Barnard, and then started working there actually in the special events department and as assistant to one of the editors. And then I worked at Essence magazine, again as an intern. Most of your great experiences are really going to be as interns. And I met Harriet Cole, who was in the Essence fashion department, but she left while I was there and decided to start her own company and write a book. And I was her assistant. So I got to do research and really delve into seeing what that process was like. And I was just sure that one day I wanted to be in that position as well, and make sure that I had a platform for my voice as a writer. And so when I graduated, Barnard was also a really wonderful opportunity for me to bring my dance into my academic studies, my degrees in anthropology and English. And I've always been inspired by Katherine Dunham and her studies and her writings and her films. And so I knew I wanted to study dance in the Orisha tradition. I grew up Ifa and with a lot of Buddhist influence in my life, and I knew about the richness of African diasporic spiritual traditions and the importance of them in preserving music and dance and how it's just kind of permeated everything else that we do. So I went to Bahia for a month through my godfather who taught capoeira, and I lived with a Mai de Santo, a priestess of Oshun, and I learned all the Orisha dances and came back and went and did a course at Columbia with a famous anthropologist, Michael Tausig, who really encouraged me to do my thesis dancing. So I presented a paper and I danced, and it was the first time I was able to really bring those things together. And that is always at the base of my work. After I graduated, my first company was Dance Brazil, which was the dance company that the gentleman João Vieira and Lorima Machado, who brought capoeira to America in the 70s, started. And I was the only American. I went to Brazil with the whole company. I didn't speak any Portuguese at the time. And I rehearsed there for 3 months and choreographed, collaborated on a choreography of a duet that I always wanted to recreate called Capoeira do Amor, without a full grasp of the language, which is a testament to how dance is language in motion. It was an incredibly enlightening experience for me to be able to do that and then travel around with them as kind of the American translator once we toured in America. After that, I did a lot of small companies in New York and a lot of started my freelance writing. And one of the companies I worked with the most was called Momix. It is called Momix. It's based in Washington, Connecticut. And I knew nothing about the company when I auditioned. And I say that just because sometimes you have to just trust your instincts and put yourself out there. And as dancers, we're doing that all the time. We're auditioning all the time. It's a lottery. You never know why you're not picked. But I always went in with a really positive attitude. And I just loved the opportunity to be in the room with other dancers. So I got into Momix, and it was really a formative experience for me because we traveled all over the world. I did have one American tour for 3 months where we traveled probably like 60 cities in 40 states. And it was pretty traumatic for me as a Black girl. And I realized that there was a lot of things that I didn't want to deal with. So I told the company I never want to do American tour again. And it was a contractual company, so we we weren't bound to tour with them if we didn't want to. And so I mainly toured in Europe and South America. And for me, that was it. I said, oh, I get to see all of these places just because I'm dancing, and like they're paying for me to go there. And meanwhile, I was starting to also get really deeper into fashion by repairing costumes on tour and making a little extra money here and there. And of course, always continuing my photography and my writing while I was touring. Then years later, I was living in Italy, in Brazil, excuse me, and went back to live with my younger sister who was in college doing an exchange program. And I went back because I really wanted to learn the language. It was a bit frustrating not knowing it. I continued to seep into Brazilian culture because it's part of my heritage. My great grandfather on my mother's side is from Maranhão in the north of Brazil. And so going back to learn the language was something I really wanted to do. So I took a break from my dance company, went back to live with my sister for 6 months in Rio de Janeiro. First, I was in Salvador the first time, Salvador, Bahia. And I went back to Rio de Janeiro. And I arrived during Carnival, and President Lula was just elected. And if you don't know who he is, he was like the Obama for them at the time, and everybody loved him. It was exciting. So I walked into a city that felt like it was having a party for a month. I didn't know what to do. I just sat on the beach, talked to whoever I could talk to, and started to learn a little bit while my sister was in school and get Blockbuster tapes with subtitles, pause, stop. I really learned language listening to music, and I seeped into the culture. And then I was looking for a job and walking down the street, and one day I looked up and I saw, oh, English school. Okay, walked up there, got a job in the English school. Another day I was in Copacabana, and I looked up and I said, dance school. And I looked and I saw their roster of what they taught. And I said, oh my goodness, Horton. And I'm from the Ailey School where they teach only Horton, Graham, Dunham, and ballet. Really, they teach also Limon and some other techniques, but mainly those are the techniques. And I went up and I got the schedule, and I went back the next day and I went to class, and I was like, my mind was spinning. It was with drums, just like at ALE. It was amazing. The teacher was amazing. And towards the end of the class, I'm going across the floor for the combination. And she's like, stop, 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 stop. She stops the music and she's like, excuse me, who are you? Where are you coming from? And I was like, oh, my name is Djassi, I'm from New York, da, da, da. And basically she told me that she had gone to New York as a 20-year-old and studied at the ALE school for several summers and fell in love with the technique and came back to Rio to create the school. So I had a job, I got a job. I started working there. And while I was living there, and it was amazing, I choreographed with them and obviously really allowed me to seep into the culture because I was around Brazilians all the time and improving my language as well. And then after Brazil, I went back with the company, toured more, and as I was touring, we toured a lot in Italy and Europe. And so I started to understand that there were different places I could live. We were in Sicily once, and they wanted to interview someone who spoke Spanish. And I said, well, I just came back from Brazil. I kind of speak Portuguese. And so I was interviewed on camera in Sicilian with Portuguese, and I could understand her, she could understand me, and that's when my mind exploded, and I got a passion for linguistics as well. And I went back to New York after touring, and I always want to mention that as a dancer, people always ask me, why aren't you teaching dance when you're not on tour and you don't have a job? I was a bartender, and I was doing a lot of freelance jobs, either writing or doing little fashion gigs. And for me, it was really important to make sure that I knew how I was spending my time. And as a scholarship student who was always told that I had to work on my ballet technique and I was late in my training, I always thought of myself as a student. And I never wanted to be a disgruntled teacher, someone who hadn't fulfilled her dreams and then wasn't passing on that sense of dreaming to their students. And so I resisted it for years, until I began living abroad and going abroad. But bartending really allowed me a freedom to choose my jobs and not feel so desperate when I went into auditions and take other opportunities. I also started to write for Trace magazine while I was on tour, which was a wonderful experience for me because it kept me connected to an international culture that was also highlighting artists and based in New York. And so while I was off tour, after being with Momix for several years, I was working in New York, and I went to go see a performance of a company called Complexions at Lincoln Center. And one of the producers that I had made friends with on tour saw me, and she's still talking to me. She says, oh, I have this TV show that I'm doing. Are you still touring with Momix? I said, no, I don't like the piece they're doing now. I'm doing something else. And so she said, oh, come over. I'm bringing some Americans for the show. And so she brought about 5 of us and a choreographer, and we danced for basically Frank Sinatra of Italy, who sang all these American songs without knowing one word of English. And it was amazing. And I used my Portuguese to kind of fight for more coverage of cleavage, because the Italian culture is very different, or we were wearing skirts, but the choreography had us doing this, and I was like, we have to talk. And the male choreographer wasn't going to do that for us, so I was doing that for us. And at the end of the show, the rest of the Americans went back, and the producer asked me to stay in Milan for another show, and I just kept working in Italy on film and television. And for me, the transition to film and television was always something that I was interested in because of the photography, but being on set and being able to see so much of what was happening behind the camera just made me want to get behind the camera even more. So even though I have work I am a multidisciplinary artist, but I have work as an actress, so that's how I appear on Google. But I started acting really because of my experience in Italy. I had my first gigs were maybe I did some theater young, but my first gigs on TV were in Italian, doing water commercials and stuff like that. So that was a really eye-opening experience for me and made me want to get behind the camera more. And so while I was in Italy also, I began making earrings and selling them on Etsy and sending them all over the world, and just always creating and always journaling. And I realized that I've always been somewhat of an archivist, and I really, really appreciate that, because I have kind of like a map of where I've been. And I mention that because when I came back from Italy after 7 years, I came back to New York, and I began working, and 3 months later I found out I was pregnant, basically. Wrap up that story. And I was like, I'm 36 years old. I always had known that my daughter was in me, and I was obviously very excited. And so as I was when I went back to Italy, I taught in Italy while I was pregnant. I think I took class until I was 8 months. And the one thing that I began doing was sewing again. And it wasn't just nesting. It was that I hated diaper bags. I didn't like the way they looked. I was like, I'm not carrying that thing just because you're a mom. Mm-mm-mm. So I started making bags, and making these totes was really wonderful because as I was in grad school, I had a business on the side on an Etsy. And then I was invited to join a collective of women. And we opened a store called Radical Women with my partner, Kim Hill, who's a singer and multidisciplinary artist as well. And so I was able to keep my fashion going and also really, let out some tension while I was in grad school. And that was really amazing as well. So one of the things that I wanted to bring up as related to our writing prompt that's going to come later is my decision to go to graduate school as a dancer, coming back to New York as a mom. I knew that I always wanted to go back to school, but I really thought I was going to go back to school for anthropology. And so I started to go back to Barnard, to go back to my college and get in touch with my mentors and deans and go take class again and, just share my work and get inspired again. And then one day I just kind of like woke up and I was like, I applied for a job and they said, oh, you need a master's. And I was like, well, I have 20 years of experience. Okay, fine, I'll get a master's. And I woke up and I saw some applications for anthropology, and then this one popped up at NYU that said dance and new media. If it had not said new media, I would have kept scrolling. I was like, what? And that excited me. So I applied and I got in and I got a fellowship, and all of a sudden I was a single mom with a 5-year-old going into grad school. And it was pretty exciting. And one of the things that happened was that I entered this department that said, we have this wonderful concentration where you can work on becoming a filmmaker or, a choreographer for film, and it's called Dance and New Media. And then I got in the department, and everything that I wanted to do related to my writing or new media, they were like, no, that's not in the thing. That's not, no. So I started working with one of the biggest magazines that I've worked with while I was in grad school in 2016. While I'm in grad school, I got an offer to write a historical profile on Dance Theater of Harlem. And Dance Theater of Harlem is one of the biggest majority Black dance companies that was founded by Arthur Mitchell in the 60s. And he was actually in Brazil teaching on an American mission when Martin Luther King Jr. was killed. And he came back and he said, I need to do something for my people. And he started in a garage in Harlem and created this school. And so I began this historical profile, and I'm a modern dancer. I'm a classically trained modern dancer, but I've become really, really steeped in classical dance because I was so criticized. I said, I'm going to be a 30-year-old ballerina. And sure enough, I performed on point with Momix, one point shoot, but we'll talk about that later, when I was 30, and honed my ballet technique in my later years. And so, doing this profile really also brought the idea to me that I wasn't in grad school just to make pretty dance films. I was in grad school to tell stories, and to tell the stories that haven't been told, and the ones that I wish I had seen, to inspire me a little bit more. Yes, I saw Debbie Allen. I had an aunt, Diane Harvey, that I was able to see live performing. I saw people like me, but I was also traversing worlds where there weren't people like me. And in the dance world, I was told, you're not good enough. And in the academic world, they were like, well, why are you messing with that? So there were a number of battles that I was fighting in different worlds, especially because in the dance world, you're not expected nor encouraged to be an intellectual or your own thinker. You want to learn, they want you to learn choreography, follow, and be able to be within a flock. And there's definitely validity to that in some choreographies, but for me, it was very stifling. So once I had my daughter and I was in grad school, my first year, because of some difficulties I had in my department, because I was basically being told that I couldn't do this, I couldn't do that, I was trying to do too much, I was trying to make my films, I was trying to write my articles. I published in this major magazine, I brought it to the school and they were like, whatever, and they didn't want to support me. And then because I had a fellowship, I had some angels come through. I just put my head down and did my work, and I got an email that said, I think you might need an advisor outside of your department. And I got an email from the head of Tisch, who gave me my fellowship, and there were names of two women, and they were both Black women, and they were both photographers and writers. And so I just picked the one that I knew who was available, and I got the wonderful Deb Willis as a mentor who's published, the plethora of books that you can all look up. And for me, being in the photography and imaging department to finish my degree was important, because transitioning to film for me was about personal work and also cultural work. It was about forever work for me. So I call it forever work because I traveled all over the world, was performing in so many theaters. And after a while, even though it's really a rush, I performed at the Pantheon in Athens, outdoor theater, amphitheater, 5,000 people under the full moon. You just saw 5,000 heads. It was gorgeous, it was amazing. But for me, I would go all over the world and just see kind of like white hair. Nobody goes to the theater. Theater is about access. Theater is about money. Theater is about cultural awareness of finding something. And so I knew, like, this is a very narcissistic art form. How am I going to evolve with it as I grow? I love being a performer. I love being on stage, but it's not me. So film for me was putting something on camera that can last, because my family and my friends really hadn't seen me perform that much. And I had my daughter, and at 16 months, when she was 16 months old, I lost my brother in a tragic motorcycle accident. Whenever I did perform in America and he came, I could hear his whistle from the back of the theater. He was my biggest fan, and someone, I wouldn't be the dancer I am without him. He made me run track in high school, and I'm still the jumper in most companies. And so for me, it was really about doing work that not only I could share with the people I love, but that had a quality that lasts and can teach. And so that's why my films are definitely, you're going to see some films that are dance films today, but a lot of my work in grad school was documentary. I did my thesis in Cuba looking at daCosta Danza, which is a classical ballet, contemporary ballet company formed by Carlos daCosta, who is one of the most prolific Black male dancers in the world. And he came from a really poor village, neighborhood in Cuba. And he had access to art and grew into this amazing ballet dancer because he was so young. So as an activist and an intellectual, my concern is taking my insecurities as a scholarship kid and putting that into play and talking about the importance of access to the arts. Because if you don't have access, you don't know what you can do. And I'm grateful and lucky that my parents were able to provide me with scholarship opportunities. But I spent most of my dance career yearning to dance, yearning to just get in the dance studio. And that's, I think, where the other aspects of my art came out, where my writing came out, my photography, my filmmaking, and my design, and even becoming a doula and working with women and womb health. That all came out of my desire to still express myself, even when I can't get in a dance studio or on a stage. And so after grad school, it was a very, very contentious moment, but that advisor and that mentor was everything, because not only did she help steer me and protect me so I could actually make my dance films and complete my degree, but we ended up collaborating professionally, and she directed a music video, a visual album for Joan Baez that I choreographed and did the costumes for, called Civil War. And then I performed a solo at the end of grad school. Second time I was allowed to perform. We'll talk about that later, because I was a technology major, so I couldn't anyway. So yeah, there were a lot of limitations. People put so many limitations on you, and then you find your creativity. So my last piece was a protest piece. It was a solo. I collaborate with jazz musicians and visual artists, and my very good friend, Shana Dullberger, she's a bassist, came to perform with me. She was on stage, and I did a protest piece where I sang Strange Fruit before I danced, and it was a month after 2 Black men were lynched. This is 2018 in Oklahoma, and I sang Strange Fruit, and I read a poem about how it wasn't criticizing specifically anything, but basically about the school, but it was a protest piece alluding to how difficult my path had been, and that no matter how many degrees I have, I'm a Black woman, and I could still be shot in the street because I have a sassy mouth. So that protest piece brought the attention of the dean, and after I graduated, she invited me to Florence to perform it at Villa La Pietra, and that was an amazing experience to return to Italy with my daughter and with my art and do that. And so one of the things that I wanted to share now that I am able to have this opportunity as a professor and birth a dance program, I really aligned with the University of Virgin Islands when they spoke with me about the way that they wanted this program to be not just technically based in dance, but theory-based, intellectually based, and focused on the highlighting of African diasporic culture and our influence in the dance world, because that's my path. And so my experience at Ailey was highly informative, but really my recent work with Dance Theater of Harlem and working on highlighting stories of pioneers of color in the classical ballet and modern worlds, that's really part of my work. So I did a documentary in Cuba. I also have another documentary that highlights the Brazilian legacy at the Dance Theater of Harlem, several generations of Black Brazilian dancers who couldn't work in Brazil, but came here. And now our principals in Dance Theater of Harlem, one who just became the first Black ballerina ever on Vogue Brazil. And so I also have a documentary that I'm working on called Legends Among Us. And it's really, again, about telling the stories of unsung heroes of color in the classical ballet and modern worlds, because when you tell your story, someone connects with it and you inspire them. It's like blowing wind under their wings and hearing echoes. It's like when you have an idea for something that you want to write, and then that whole day you keep seeing some symbol that keeps reminding you of that thing. You hear echoes of that energy. And so when I wanted to talk again about this moment that we're in before we get on to, as I wrap up, because there's so much, I don't know if I've left everything out, but I wanted to talk about this moment that we're in because even though I knew that I would always dance, I got the good answer in grad school when people kept saying, why don't you just teach dance? Why don't you just teach dance? And I'd be like, I'm not a dance teacher, even though I have taught as a function of living abroad. When I got to Brazil, what did I do? I taught dance. When I got to Italy, I was on TV, and in the summers, they used to pay me to go all around and teach dance because I was on TV, and I was that Black girl on TV, and I taught Horton, and there's not a Horton technique there. So it was exciting to give something that they didn't have and show them a technique that for me has been really part of my growth and my longevity as a dancer. To be able to be in grad school with people 20 and more years younger than me and still be at par physically and felt really empowering. And I know it had to do with that technique. So my passion for teaching came from living abroad. And then I used to say to people in grad school, well, I'll teach when I can be like Debbie Allen. Because really, if I can go back a little bit, the story came that when I was 6, my dad took me to see the movie Fame down in the West Village. And I asked him to stay and watch it again after I saw it first time. Now, the original movie Fame, if you've never seen it, it's not a pretty movie about dance. It's like gritty. It's like New York gritty life. And I was like, I want to do that. So something in the 6-year-old me knew something about it. And then, forward to now, dance has really allowed me a pathway into my writing and really finding my voice as a writer and knowing what I want to talk about. And my designs, I started with costumes and really getting creative with that. My photography, my filmmaking, all of that is through movement. And so when COVID happened, obviously as a performer, everybody was freaking out. Everybody was just like, what are we going to do? And they thought it's just going to be a month, it's just going to be 2. And there was lots of chatter. They call it, in Buddhism, we call it senseless chatter, lots and lots of noise. And I just said, oh my God, I'm a single mom. I've been running grad school. Now I'm doing grants and I'm writing this grant and then I'm writing that project and I'm on deadline over here and I have this film and I can breathe for a second. And I sat and I just breathed and I reviewed a lot of my journals and I went through and I realized that I had been this archivist all my life. And I started writing my memoir through remembering who I was and kind of healing that young Jossie that got so criticized in the dance schools, or that felt not so this or that, or, you know, in different worlds. And so that for me was really empowering. And I call it listening to the winds. You know, this is a really good time to really just go within and listen to the winds, because we're in the age of communication, age of Aquarius, things are shifting. And I think that's how I was led to this position, because for me, my work wasn't just about what am I going to put out next so that I can eat and survive? What can I put out next so I can eat and survive? I just like was and adamant about being a creator, even if on paper it looked like, what is the single mother doing running around town not sleeping? People used to ask me in grad school, I slept 4 hours a night. I used to get up at 6 a.m., meditate, chant, wake my daughter up so that she could meditate with me, get her to school, do this, run around. My mother was my partner, saving my, you know, and I just knew that I had to get something out, you know, I had to create it. And so sitting and listening to the wind and really finding whatever your own spiritual practice or self-practice is to regenerate your spirit after being out in the world, after receiving criticism, after someone tells you you can't do something, after you get not the greatest grade on that paper or whatever it is. You always have to find out, what is it that I can do to remind myself where I'm coming from? And sometimes I had to look back and ask 17-year-old Jossie, because one of my first experiences living abroad was a term abroad in Egypt. And I took a sketchbook and I filled it and I read it, and it blew my mind. I would sit in temples and draw. I'm not a drawer. I don't know how to, I didn't even know if I said it right. I'm not an artist, you know? I didn't think I was, but then I looked back and I said, no, you're just criticizing yourself because you needed to be validated in this box. And you've always been breaking out of boxes. You know, before non-binary was a thing, I was like, I'm crooked, who's straight? You know, I just, you know, how do we constantly say, don't do that to me, I'm an individual, this is my path, this is how I'm gonna pave it, you know, write your path. And so, for me, that was really a healing thing about this moment, was being able to go within, know that I am my source as a person having a human experience, a spiritual being having a human experience on this planet. Like, how am I going to deal with my physical needs, feeding my daughter, but knowing that everything comes from my art. And if it doesn't come from my heart, then it's not going to pan out in the real world. And so I'm grateful that I have been able to get kind of something out, and I hope that I've covered everything. This platform is really, I'm really grateful for it, because I work with young girls in my life, young people in my life, and in grad school, for example, I got gifted with 2 children because of the work that I did, and they're just my spiritual children. It's like we've known each other since birth, and it inspires me. Annalise is here with my daughter Miral, and Maxfield, you know, and Maxfield's a principal dancer with complexions, and they are, you know, at the top of their field. So it's really been inspiring to me that not only has dance been my passport, but it's also brought me my family and helped me connect in ways where before I spoke 4 languages. Now I speak Portuguese, Italian, and Spanish. I only spoke English until I was 28, by the way. So it really is a function of living abroad and being an artist that I gained languages. But before I spoke languages, dance was really the way that I moved through worlds. And it was really the way that I validated my existence. I was kind of not even though I was a break dancer, I was a house dancer. But certain hip hop moves at a certain point, I don't know, late 90s, they used to tease me. So I'd go home and I'd practice. I was like, what do you mean? I'm not gonna get kicked out of that club. So for me, that's how I moved physically and through neighborhoods. And then it helped me when I got to another country, because I didn't have that fear of not being able to connect with people. I knew that I had a way to connect regardless, and it allowed me to have the confidence to travel anywhere. So I'm excited to share with you some of the work, and then talk about how we do our writing prompt. But I have to thank Andrea, Erica, and Lizbeth because for seeing the artist that I am. Because I know you came thinking about just a talk about the history of Black dance. And maybe we could do something about that later. But I encourage everyone to please, if you do not know the work of Alvin Ailey, if you do not know Arthur Mitchell, if you do not know Dancer of Harlem, we'll share some screenshots of my article, and you'll have my website. You can go and look at some articles that will give you a good background on the incredible contribution that Black dancers and Black dance has had on American and international dance, classically and modern.
That's wonderful. Yeah, we will share some links. So I think now we're going to watch one of the short films that you mentioned, Sleepless. And while we play this film, if the audience, if you have questions for Jossie, you can go ahead and start putting them in the chat as you're watching something that just really helps summarize the amazing work that she's doing in all different fields. So we'll watch this film, and while we're watching it, go ahead and put your questions in the chat. And let's play. There you go. Yeah, it's beautiful. You're already seeing comments in the chat. Um, yeah, so Jassi, there are already some questions and a lot of love in the chat. If you want to ask your question off mute, you can feel free to just say like, I want to ask out loud, or you can raise your hand, or you can just come off mute. But I'll scroll up to a question here just to get them started, and everyone else feel free to jump in. So a mentee in the audience is asked, I just wanted to say how much I admire you as a person, as a parent, as a dancer, etc. I relate to you so much, and I just wanted to know what exactly gave you the power and the energy to wake up every morning.
That is a great question. Who's that? Where are you?
That is Giselle.
Giselle, I don't see any faces, but so that's a great question. Well, becoming a mother is a powerful thing. I really knew that I wanted to be a mom, and so being able to continue my dance career as a mom, I never thought I would be a single parent. Honestly, I never thought I wouldn't be able to continue dancing. And so when that was, apparent, I have to say, my daughter always moved. Like she started walking at 9 months, and she is, if I need reminders from the universe to wake up, this one, it was my reminder. And so that's one thing. But the other thing is that, when you have something that you realize is a passion, when you're a child, you have something that you love, a lot of times it's squished and you're told, oh, that's just a hobby. It's just a thing you're doing. And I knew that this was my oxygen. I just knew that I had to figure out a way to do it, even if it was by myself with a camera. I went through a very contentious divorce. I entered grad school again with an eviction notice on my door. I got on food stamps for the first time. And sometimes I would just I got into grad school with videos that I did before I even knew I was going to grad school. When I was going through the divorce in the beginning, and I would take a tripod to Prospect Park, and I would just put on a song that made me feel like, ugh, and I would just dance. And then I'd make a film out of it. I got my angst out. It was my therapy. And if there are any movers in this room, you know what I mean. If you're any writers, sometimes I just take my journal and I'm in the dark and I can't even see. I don't care how my handwriting looks. And I'm like, it's a similar kind of thing. When you have to do it, you have to do it. So there definitely were tough moments, but again, that moment in my life, if I could get through grieving and I'm still alive, if I could get through a really difficult birth and birth my child, I figured, okay, I can get up every day and think about dancing and really push through. And there were some days I came home from grad school and my mom would leave because she maybe picked up my daughter from school. And I literally had this entrance in my foyer. I'd put my bags down and I'd slide face first into the floor and just cry. And I'd get it out. And then I'd get up and I'd feed her and I'd do this and I'd do that. And again, I really began steepening into my Buddhist practice in the last 6 years through that. So meditation, chanting really works for me. Everybody you have to find what works for you. But it also helped me vocalize and sing more and become a singer in my work, chanting. So that's a whole other story. But yes, I vocalize in my work as well. So that I think that would be my answer, the fighting against the machine and knowing that your art is your oxygen and keeping that high, like your spirit.
Question in the chat. I'll just go in order here. And Maya, let me know if you want to ask your question out loud. You can just let me know. I see you.
I can read it if you want.
Yeah, for sure.
My message just said, "Hi Jossie, you're amazing and so inspiring. I'm a dancer too, and I feel like I can relate to your desire to storytell and create in every way I can. How did you get over the pressure of feeling like you need to do one thing in life or having to dedicate yourself to one thing? Because as a high schooler, everyone is asking me what I want to do, and the truth is I want to do everything. And for some reason that scares me. So seeing you do so much and live life to its fullest vibrance gives me so much hope."
So yeah, definitely people were like, you need to just dance. You're late. Just dance. Just dance. So there is always going to be that pressure. I will say this much. the focus that you have to have and the discipline that you have to have as a dancer to work on your body and get over that hump where like you really want to get a split, and then one day you're like woo, and you want your leg there, and then one day it's up there, you know, whatever these milestones that we have, those kept pushing me physically. And I have to say, training was my focus that allowed me, just like my core focus that allowed me to branch out to do other things. Keeping dance as my center was the way that I functioned to be able to do other things, because I knew that I had to get my degree, and I knew that I wanted to study anthropology and English, and I knew I wanted to write and all this. But the engine for going to Barnard and being in New York was always Ailey. I gotta get my training, whatever that is. And then I got out of Ailey, and I had to get the Ailey out of me so I could be the free dancer I needed to be. Do you know what I mean? And be the choreographer I need to be. So there's always gonna be something that you're breaking out of. But I have to say, if you feel like dance is your engine, then continue to do the other things. Like I said, I'm a journaler. I started repairing costumes in a company. So I wasn't, I do feel like I call myself a jack master, because I feel like I do have a better understanding of how to get all of my balls levitating in the air at the same time now. And people will say, you know, I was doing everything all the time, and you don't want to burn out. So I think the moment when you know, okay, this is my engine and this is my focus, and then I can do other things. Because again, I was on tour for 9 months a year. I think the one year I did maybe 10 months a year. So I got to tour quite a bit, but every time I was home, I was bartending, sewing, bartending, writing, bartending, doing this, doing whatever I could to do other things while I knew, okay, I'm going to have this tour next, or I'm going to do this next. And sometimes one of my first articles was a hip hop timeline in the Daily News. And I remember it was due around the same time that I had this Ailey performance. And even though, you know, prioritize the dance, that performance happened. I got the deadline in, and I look back and I'm like, I don't remember that performance, and I do have a program, but I do have this beautiful written archive piece that I wrote, and I have the memory of struggling to do both and surviving. So I hope that helps.
There's another question in the chat from Michelle. There are a few questions. I think we're probably going to take one or two more before moving to the writing prompt, but I want to highlight this question from Michelle, who asked, how did you use your experience at Barnard to network into the magazine industry and find work at dance companies and professional creative advice that you might have?
Wow, well, my experiences at Barnard, I have to say, I chose to go to that school because I knew that all of the students there were motivated. And they had a reputation of being really serious and really academic. And I knew that if I didn't have an intense school situation, I might not continue, because I was getting pressure every summer from Ailey to stay for the whole, like stay full time for the scholarship. And why don't you just take a year off? And this is the year you should take off. And this is the year. And I was like, what do you mean? So that was really, that was one thing. Now, networking in into the magazine industry, I didn't network. I literally found Vibe magazine ad in the back of the Voice paper. I circled it, and I applied to the Voice and to Vibe. I sent in my resume, I interviewed, and I got the job. Very similar thing happened with Essence. I saw it was available. I talked to someone. I said, I want to go there from here. I'm leaving this internship to that internship. And someone said pass her resume through. She's already at the magazine. She knows what to do, and she likes fashion. Boom. So it is sometimes about finding the people, and again, that can lead you to the path of what you want to do. But networking in dance companies is not a thing. You audition, and you either get in or you don't. And I think that is a really big reality to just check and face right now, and then know that you can always create your own work. But again, taking auditions, you know, one of the things that I appreciate about my inner child and natural character that came out is I don't take myself that seriously. And so I had to get to a point where I could go to auditions and know this is a lottery. I know I'm fierce. I'm about to give them everything. But maybe they're just not looking for someone who's 5'5" and 3/4. Maybe they're looking for someone who's 5'7". Maybe, you know, whatever. You know, and as a Black dancer, I had to be like, whatever, fine. You know, a lot of times you just suck it up to what it is. But yeah, that's a whole other conversation.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, and then one last one that kind of is a great like summary question before you move into the I am artist statement, from a mentee alum. Well, what is the greatest advice you can give to an aspiring dancer? I want to dance in music videos. How can I make that happen?
Hmm. Well, the industry is changing right now. This is the moment we're in. You're in an opportune moment. So I always try to look at the bright side of this virtual world. So back in the day, I would say, well, you need to get a commercial agent and you need to start going to Broadway Dance Center and you need to start going to these commercial studios and working with these choreographers. Because unfortunately, in order to get and to work with certain music video choreographers, it's a club. You gotta get in their club. You gotta take their classes. They have to see you enough. Sometimes you just get an agent and you walk into the room. One of my favorite audition memories was while I was at Barnard and Madonna auditioned for this tour. It was like a big tour. And there was Lafayette Street and Astor Place. And it was like 5 blocks long. So hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. I waited online at like 5 a.m., get upstairs, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. Whole day long, I met the choreographer, Mia Michaels, on that. I got down to the last 10 girls. There were 2 Black girls. One was bald, and there was me. She got the job, and I did it. And sure enough, the other white girl had a mohawk, and it was a whole other kind of look. So that audition, even though I didn't get it, that experience really enriched, my life. So, in terms of advice as a dancer, in terms of how you go into the world, it's like, just show up the best you can, because you don't know how that's going to reverberate. I ended up working with Mia Michaels a little bit years later. And, her remembering me from that experience. And so music videos now, I would say, get a camera, you have a phone, learn how to film in a horizontal position, start working on your own choreography, and utilize the platforms like TikTok and Instagram that allow you to show your work, not sell yourself, show your work and show who you are as a dancer. Being as authentic as you can be in those moments when you're presenting your work on these social platforms, that will make sure that you're in the room that you want to be in. Maybe you wanted to be in one music video and then you get in the room and it's just, you never know. I'm just saying, be your authentic self every time you put yourself on camera and start creating your own work on camera. Start understanding, get these Slice or these little apps that you can start to edit your own films. You can learn so much. I say I went to NYU for grad school. I went to private schools and public schools all my life. That was like my least favorite academic experience, because I really feel like they just said, here, learn it yourself. That's what I learned in grad school. You have to learn it yourself. So this is a wonderful time to harness what you already know about technology. I grew up with one of those phones, and I had to learn this. Y'all grew up with this. So you can film yourself and you can start creating your own work, and that will automatically put you on a platform for people who are looking for film bodies that move on film.
That was a great answer, especially about having the agency to create your own work and put it out there, right? Like, no one can stop you. So that's great. So let's move into the writing prompt for the evening. This is Jassi's artist statement, if you want to read it for the group.
Okay, so I'll read it and then I'll tell you about it. I am an image maker, shapeshifter, a perception challenger who delights in unearthing magic and possibility. I am much more than these words. A dancer, a choreographer, a writer, an anthropologist, a designer, an activist, a photographer, a filmmaker, mother, and jackmaster. I am an explorer, a native New Yorker, a fortunate traveler, baptized in the pavements of my city, for whom dance has been my passport to life. I am a reminder that we are not there yet, or rather, we are not yet there, that we can learn more from each other, that we can challenge societal ills and still bring forth beauty. I am seeped in justice, covered in love, grounded in mysticism, and creating art to aid in the liberation and recovery of the human race. Dance is the filter through which I see everything. I move in a ritual sense, offering thanks to those who have paved this path with rhythmic feet pounding the earth like a heartbeat. I agree with Pina. As long as we dance, we will never be lost. So Pina is Pina Bausch. She's one of my favorite choreographers. She's a German choreographer, so you can check her out. And thank you, Giselle. So quickly, I'll tell you a little bit about this, and then we'll do the prompt. So this is on my website in my About page, and this came from a task I had to do for one of my second year final classes in grad school, where we had to write our artist statement, and using, I am. And so I was told in 2 different classes that I had to rewrite this several times. I was definitely criticized for the style and told, well, okay, that's fine. But we were saying you need to do like this. And this is, foofy and fluffy. And I let the criticism happen and got my only A- in grad school. I got all A's. And this one had to be my last class for this class. I got an A-, but I put it up on my website because it is true to who I am. So my offer for the prompt is, without all the boxes, without anyone's definitions, without all the limitation, without all the insecurity, who are you? And what is your purpose? And where does it spring from?
So we're going to take about 5 minutes. I'll play some music and we'll write. You can write your I am statement directly in the chat, and then we'll share for a little portion. So feel free to type, or you can use your journal, but if you want to share, you have to share out loud.
you all to wrap up. I know how it is when writing prompts happen. I'm the loquacious one in the room who the teacher's like, pen down, and I'm like, yeah, whatever. Well, I'm so happy we were able to share Sleepless, and I know we went over that. One of the other films that I did was Not Me Dancing, and it's in collaboration with another female artist. She was from Dubai. She was a director, and she wrote a film. She's a Muslim woman. She wrote a film about two lovers who weren't able to touch. And it's a film I'd love to share with this community. I can pass it through Girls Right Now. And the two films, as Erica brought up, were really significant in this moment for how we as a culture don't really deal with grief, and how we also in this moment are having a hard time dealing with not having physical touch with each other. So I wanted to just share that, because as a doula, as an activist, as a social scientist and anthropologist, I think it's important that we also look at our spiritual and mental health and self-care. And so just in closing out, that knowing that we're artists and there's a lot that's unsure in the world right now, and we don't know how we're going to create or what we're going to create next, but know that as you keep your art high and your soul high and your purpose high, also take moments for self-care, connect with the ones you love in the ways that you can in this age of Aquarius, whether it's sometimes just sitting and doing a meditation and sending them a hug, sending them breath. I do that a lot these days. I do a lot of dream work. I believe I see people and hug them and kiss them all over their faces in their dreams. And that's very comforting. So I hope that through my work, I'm able to help heal as well the balm that we need as human beings again, so that we can rise to this opportunity and create the world that we are intended to live in, a more humane world where art is held high and the divine feminine and the divine masculine are not combating each other, but in fact collaborating together in order to preserve Mother Earth. So that would be my closing. And I just have so much gratitude for everyone who came, everyone who, even those that didn't, and sent energy this way for this platform to exist. Thank you to everyone who created this platform. And I really look forward to continuing to work with Girls Right Now and mentoring some of your amazing artists in your program.
Djassi, you are so wonderful. You are literally beyond words. I can't find the right words to describe the generosity that you've given us this evening, the spirit that you share with everyone. I don't know about everyone else, but I feel energized. I feel more alive. I feel a little bit more hopeful about the world just from listening to you talk about your journey and your offering. So thank you so much. I want to encourage us all to come off mute and just like cheer, clap. I'll start. Woo! Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Brilliant. And you can follow Djassi. You can follow her work that she's doing. There's so much that she's doing that we didn't even get to, that she'll have upcoming projects. You can keep up with her on social media. Lisbeth's dropped the link to her website in the chat. You've heard her name here, and you're going to continue hearing her name. And we're super excited to be in community with Djassi now, and we're just honored to have her here. So thank you so much. We have a big international audience, which is awesome. And I want to share with you about Girls Right Now and how you can be involved. Of course, there's always like donations and becoming a circle member, which gives you special benefits, but also Girls Right Now is a writing and mentoring program. So if you're here interested in being a mentee or a mentor, we have an inquiry form that you can fill out. You can also share with other people who you know. And if they are looking for a community to be in space with, to write, to grow as an artist, Girls Right Now is that community. So those links are in the chat, and you can share them far and wide with anybody you want to share them with.